last your life. You'll never fail to satisfy, satisfy.
Majority Report with Sam Seder. It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, July 3rd, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, George Monbiot, columnist for The Guardian magazine, or I should say paper, author of Out of the Wreckage, A New Politics for an Age of Crisis, on our new story of restoration. Also on the program today, Donald Trump narrows it down as he decides how to turn the clock back 80 years on justice in this country. Meanwhile, Republican Congressman, founder of the Freedom Caucus, Jim Jordan, accused of turning a blind eye to sexual abuse at Ohio State when he was a wrestling coach. Federal D.C. District Court judge says asylum seekers cannot be jailed. More details on Scott Pruitt's relentless corruption. And surprise! Ron Paul can't stop hiring racists.
God damn it! What the hell keeps happening?
In good news today, Alan Dershowitz has no friends. And
but
Trump
still
voters
causes anti-Semitism.
Still causes anti-Semitism.
Like being gay in the 1950s.
Trump voters a little confused about who he'll pick for Supreme Court. And lastly, Sam. It's not merely my name anymore. Now it's a sinkhole for bankers' money. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. I know, that may be too much of. I don't know if that may be too much of a tease. I don't think I can just leave that Sam thing hanging out there. I wasn't planning on talking about this yet, but let me just briefly tell you that Sam is the name of a new party that is being.
Excuse you. A movement.
A new movement. Excuse me. Sam is the name of a new movement. It's the Save America movement.
Tell me more.
Well, I will. I will, man. This is started by a 51-year-old homeowner in the New York suburbs. That's the way it's pitched. I'm going to bet I have a good idea where this is. He's a top lawyer at Morgan Stanley and has a seat on the firm's management committee. He is just determined to get this country back on track. He is going to serve America via his Serve America movement, or SAM, as he's revving it up. He is now collecting money from friends of his who are investment bankers. Richard Bennett, and a partner at the investment firm B4 Capital, contributed $140,000 to SAM. I should say the movement, not me. As Richard Bennett put it, I'm like, why not? What else are we going to do? That's the only thing that's going to fix it.
Right. That's usually of a lot of movement leaders.
Yeah.
Like a Gandhi or an Allende. They say, yeah, sure.
Why not? Might as well support that. Yeah. It's got an upbeat website. There are absolutely no
website.
No specifics,
no policies, and
no specifics on immigration, reproductive rights, or the healthcare system. Here are some of the principles: applying America's innovative spirit.
Yep.
Strong, clear-eyed, values-based leader. That's what they're looking for.
This is like the copy for the podcast.
And it's the vitality of local communities.
It's all coded.
There you go. So I think their first candidate that they're going to back is, I think, like a mayor from Syracuse or something.
Nice. Wait, not the woman who just won the Democratic nomination.
No. Maybe somewhere else. I may have misread that. I don't even remember.
This sounds like a great initiative you got.
They've raised more than $1.4 million.
It's quite a movement.
I think, yeah. I think probably from about 12 people. Would be my guess. Actually, probably less, because 10,000 seems to be the least amount. There's a 50,000 contribution. But understand, folks, Sam, not me, the Serve America movement, wants to be more than a party backed by bankers and lawyers. So they apparently don't talk about New York too much. The group did its first big voter survey in Kansas. And it says it has cash coming in from small donors across the U.S. There you go. And the headquarters, which has a handful of staffers, located inside a co-working space in Denver. There you go.
I wonder if that Kick the Can guy is involved with this.
I know. Undoubtedly, right?
I wonder, we got to look if, laid off Third Way and Peterson Institute staffers just desperately trying to get this guy's number.
This is
maybe some of them will get confused and give the money to you instead.
That would be great. That would we got to maybe figure out
some search engine optimization.
I think so, right?
I'm sure I'll get a cut of it for having that great idea.
Well, I mean, of course. I'll kick back some. That's the way we work around here.
The innovative spirit of America.
Exactly. That's what it's time to innovate, folks.
Yeah.
If anybody out there can get the Serve America movement, or how about this? The Sam America movement. Right? SAM would be the initials of it, but we just call it the SAM, or the Seder America movement.
It is a zero-sum game.
Total zero-sum. All right. Meanwhile, the this is and look, when we report on stuff like this, sometimes it makes me reevaluate what we're doing around here. Maybe the way we've structured the office a little bit may be wrong, because we are probably, I mean, in terms of miles, we couldn't be more than, 15 miles, not even, from Long Island, right? I mean, literally part of Long Island. I mean, technically. But maybe, I don't know, 5 miles. You're out in Long Island. I think people would identify in that way, 5 or 6 miles. And, of course, with traffic, that'll take you about 12 hours. But nevertheless, the idea that we have not reported on the stories, plural, of how MS-13 had occupied and taken over various communities within miles of where we are is a damn embarrassment to me. And I know that we have failed in this regard because Donald Trump told Maria Bartiromo that...
Did you do that on purpose, or do you want her actual name?
What is her real name?
Bartiromo.
I
like what was it? Bartlett Romo?
I don't know. I mean, look, I'm too
Bartiromo.
You know what? My understanding is that she'll agree to anything you say to her, according to this interview. So here is Donald Trump talking about how right in front of our faces, he cleared up this problem.
In the meantime, we have to have strong border protection. We have to have strong borders. We don't want crime. The Democrats want to have no borders. They want to get rid of ICE. ICE is
I'm just going to say that. Yeah. The 28-year-old socialist that just beat out Joe Crowley.
Pause it for 1 second.
ICE.
I don't know if I've seen anyone have more enthusiasm about anything ever than Maria Bartiromo jumping in to pre-agree with Donald Trump here. All right, just go back a little bit.
She doesn't pre-agree. I love it.
The 28-year-old socialist that just beat out Joe Crowley says abolish ICE. And get this, more Democrats are getting in line with that. Kirsten Gillibrand today saying we need to abolish ICE.
Well, I hope they keep thinking about it because they're going to get beaten so badly. ICE, these are the guys that go in and take MS-13 and they take them out because they're much tougher than MS-13, like by a factor of 10. And these are the ones,
10
you get
times
rid of
tougher.
ICE, you're going to have a country that you're going to be afraid to walk out of your house. I love that issue if they're going to actually do that. They're seriously talking about that because you are going to have a country that's crime-ridden. The Border Patrol agents, ICE, these people are incredible. They were the ones, actually, when Melania went down, she was talking about the Border Patrol agents, not the ICE, because she doesn't see. But ICE, Border Patrol, these are incredible patriots. What? The job they have is so dangerous. You know Long Island very well, right?
Catch and release.
Well, how about Long Island?
Right.
They go into Long Island. They actually liberate towns. They liberate towns. These are incredible people. If the Democrats go left, okay, if they do that, like I always say, Maxine Waters is their new leader. Between Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi and getting rid of ICE and having open borders, and the biggest thing, you have open borders, all it's going to do is lead to massive, massive crime. That's going to be their platform. Open borders, which equals crime. I think they'll never win another election, so I'm actually quite happy about it.
Well, first off, let me talk about the liberation that has taken place of Long Island towns, the multiple liberations of towns, where Long Islanders came out with candy, flowers, cigarettes to give to the...
It is a GI. Thank you. Now I can go back to the Foot Locker.
It is an
Thank
ice.
you for a liberty. It is an ice. It is an ice.
They liberated us.
Now we can go
From
back to the
totally
overpriced
liberated.
sushi place.
And I mean, I wonder where they pushed. They must have pushed ICE people into the
Hamptons, actually.
into the
'cause it's
Hamptons,
deeper
right?
into the island.
Because they haven't come to Brooklyn.
No.
Or maybe they swam across the channel and went over to like New London, Connecticut, or something. Maybe
That's
over
actually
to
probably
New
true.
Haven.
They
perhaps.
probably are in
They're holding strong in Montauk.
That's right. There's one. Their supply lines are a little bit. They're getting money. They're getting supplies from the ocean.
I do picture like MS-13 leaders watching that interview and being like, Melania doesn't what?
First off, the fact of the matter is that I don't know if there was one documented arrest of an ICE agent of an MS-13 member at the border. Don't you think we would have heard about it by now?
I think we would have.
I mean, it would be plastered everywhere.
Now, with it.
I mean, we do live in a bit of a bubble, you know. It's like that New Yorker cover, you know, Long Island. Where's that?
It's impossible. But we do know that ICE is stopping people on buses. They're rounding up people who work in farms. That's the classic MS-13 move. Pretend you're a farm worker. Work on the farms until we activate your sleeper cell.
Well, yeah,
it's just
that is
unbelievable. But
right.
What's really sad about this is it's too bad that there was no journalist even remotely around Donald Trump when he said that to say, hey, wait, what? Liberate Long Island? Do you think Maria Bartiromo has any questions as to whether or not there's been cities in Long Island that have been liberated from MS-13? Do you think that she's actually like sitting there going like, oh yeah, no, of course, I read about that?
I think that she doesn't even. I think it's almost like precognition. She cares so little either way.
She's not at CNBC anymore, right? She's now
she's at Fox Business.
Okay, I was going to ask a question like, how could someone actually maintain, even someone pretending to be a journalist at a news outlet who allowed for, never mind the entire interview, which is a joke, very much like that, but sits there and allows for that to be said and just is like, yeah. I mean, it's
actually, I mean, the problem is always.
She's one of the best in the business.
Yeah,
she's one of the best in the
not
biz.
Stunning. It's absolutely be expected. And also, just as always, I love to note that it was founded in LA in the 80s. It's an American gang.
There you go.
I'm still stuck on the image of MS-13 like holed up in the surf lodge in Montauk, like, we got enough oysters and rosé to last all summer.
That's right. They're going to just sit there and nothing but a rosé. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, George Monbiot. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program columnist for the Guardian newspaper and author of his most recent, which is now out in paperback. I have it here in my hand. Out of the Wreckage, a new politics for an age of crisis. George Monbiot, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Sam. The pleasure's mine.
All right, so I want to. I know some of this we have talked about, but I want to. I want to. It bears repeating because we're still largely in the wreckage, and I mean, talk about the two main political stories. Well, before we get there, your concept of how politics changes, what creates political change?
Yeah, well, the key factor, bigger than leadership, bigger than party, bigger than policy, is story. It is having a powerful narrative that of the kind that resonates with people, resonates with their expectations of what a political narrative is. And throughout history, basically it is one kind of narrative, which is what I call the restoration story, which says disorder afflicts the land caused by powerful and nefarious forces working against the interests of humanity. But the hero or heroes will fight those powerful and nefarious forces against the odds, overthrow them, and restore order to the land. And that's the basic template of just about every successful political and religious transformation story there has ever been. And I contend that those kinds of stories are absolutely essential to that transformation, and that those of us who want to change the world have neglected that knowledge at our cost.
All right. Well, so I mean, walk us through. I think the main stories that we've had. I guess in the 20th century, 21st century now, and how that process took hold. How that process of telling those stories, I guess, those restoration stories.
Well, if you look at the two big stories of the past 80 years, they are really Keynesian social democracy and neoliberalism. And Keynesian social democracy is about increasing state spending by taxing rich people, spending the money back into the economy, using that as a stimulus to trigger economic activity, which then generates further jobs, which then generates further money, and so it goes on. Whereas neoliberalism is kind of the opposite. It says we've got to shrink the state, we've got to shut down regulation, shut down intervention, and allow, treat human society as a business and effectively ensure that all human relations are more or less reduced to buying and selling. Well, what's interesting is that while these stories are diametrically opposed to each other, and Keynesians and neoliberals hate each other with a passion, the narrative structure they used was more or less identical. And so Keynesian social democracy says the world has been thrown into disorder by the powerful and nefarious forces of the economic elite, who through the 19th and early 20th centuries grabbed almost all social wealth for themselves, depriving other people of wealth, forcing them into extreme poverty, into unemployment, and into debt, which culminated in the Great Disorder of the Great Depression, which created crisis and dislocation and disruption and war throughout the world. But the hero of the story, who is the enabling state, supported by the middle and working classes, will fight those powerful and nefarious forces and against the odds, overthrow them, tax the very rich, often at extremely high rates, regulate, rebuild the state in order to create strong public services, strong social safety nets. In doing so, create the security and the circulation which allows other people's private economy to take off, thereby restoring order to the land. And the neoliberals say the land has been thrown into disorder by the powerful and nefarious force of the collectivizing state, which, even though it might seem benign in its initial stages, for example, in the US New Deal or the British welfare state, will inexorably lead to tyranny, take us down the road to serfdom, and end up with a sort of Stalinist or Nazi situation. But the hero of the story, the freedom-seeking entrepreneur, will fight the collectivizing forces of the state and against the odds overthrow them, and through creating space for the market will restore freedom, opportunity, and individualism, which has been crushed by collectivism, thereby restoring order to the land. And what we see there is these opposite stories using exactly the same narrative structure, because it is that structure that works.
And all right, so to what extent and so we get a hint as to where you're going with this in terms of what we need to do next. But before we move on to that, in terms of well, all right, let's talk about what you perceive the next restoration story will be or could be, and then I want to talk about sort of the tactical and strategic differences by way Keynesian, the Keynesian story and the neoliberal story were adopted. But let's go to the story that you see is available for us to embrace / tell.
Sure. So this goes something like this. The land has been thrown into disorder by the powerful and nefarious forces of neoliberalism that have set us apart, that have atomized society, that have told us there is no such thing as society, and that have told us that any collective action is illegitimate. Politics itself is illegitimate because only economic activity is a legitimate means of changing society. And that economic activity is...
It sounds like your kids do not agree with this.
There's a bit of social activity going on.
No worries.
And that economic activity is through buying and selling is the only way of determining how society should be organized. In so doing, they have created a series of crises, financial crisis culminating in the great crash of 2008, environmental crises, social crises, and indeed personal crises, in that the great spread of so many mental health disorders seems to be associated with the age of loneliness that this toxic doctrine has tried to create. But the heroes of the story, us, will confront these powerful and nefarious forces by rebuilding community, generous, inclusive communities in which our new politics will be embedded. And through an escalating process of constructing community, of then reclaiming power from the center. We still need the state, but we also need to have genuine political power vested in community and genuine economic power. We'll create a politics of belonging that against the odds will restore order to the land.
Okay, so all right, so let's go back and talk about how these stories, I mean, if that's the story that we have, that we will have this restoration of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of more equity, I guess, as well, and sort of a broader sense of shared destiny. Let's go back to how Keynesianism was adopted and broadly became, so that we can talk about the sort of the different challenges that may exist today than existed then, or vice versa.
Sure. So Keynesianism kind of, and certainly in the form that was promoted by Lord Keynes himself, came from within what would be accurately called the liberal establishment. And there genuinely was a liberal establishment in those days. Keynes worked within the British Treasury. He was very well connected in society, both in terms of the economic and political mainstream, but also culturally through the Bloomsbury Group. And he really experienced very little resistance. There was some, but when he published his general theory in 1936, which was unquestionably a work of brilliance, and at a time when change was desperately needed and a whole new story was desperately needed, it was very quickly recognized as being a potential solution to the escalating series of economic and political crises that the world was facing. And it didn't take long for pretty senior members of the establishment, first in the United Kingdom, then elsewhere in the world, particularly in the United States, to pick it up and run with it. Now, it also didn't take long for some of his ideas to start to be diluted. He went to the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 with a really quite brilliant set of proposals for how the global trading system should be run and the global financial system. And one by one, they were all knocked down in favor of dollar hegemony and global finance, which led to many of the problems, which then later crashed Keynesianism and ensured that by the late 1970s, it was pretty well dead. But it was not the sort of grassroots movement that I envisage now.
Right.
And there's very little opportunity for creating an elite transformation of the kind that Keynesianism represented. I mean, what was interesting about it was that it very quickly gathered huge popular support as well. You know, even though it came from within the heart of the establishment, because it was broadly socially just and had a lot of transformative potential, people quickly saw that it was going to be good for them. Now, there are very few and very thin ideas coming from the elite which fit that description these days.
Right.
We're in a very different situation.
But there was I mean, also, I would imagine, right? I mean, there's a couple other factors going on at that time. There's a desperation of sorts, or an exhaustion, maybe, or just a general sense of a need for restoration, right? I mean, you're following World War II. There's also a much more limited mechanisms to mass communicate, and so they're much more. Our societies were not as stratified, I guess, when it came to hearing sort of a broad-based message. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I mean, there certainly was a lot more homogeneity and sort of artificial unity in society. I mean, this was an age characterized at the beginning of J.B. Priestley's novel, The Good Companions, as factory towns in which thousands of men would come out to watch the local football team, all dressed identically, behaving identically, doing the same jobs, having the same hobbies, the same clothes, the same houses. And that wasn't, in the industrial cities, that wasn't an inaccurate portrayal. You know, the mainstream working class, the industrial proletariat, was pretty homogenous, certainly by comparison to today. And it wasn't really until the age of the New Left, kicking off in the 1960s, that we began to see the great diversification of people discovering identities which had really been suppressed, often with violence, and finding a sort of freedom from the cultural uniformity that prevailed before then. But that uniformity also gave the working class great power, because they could act more or less as a body, and people could basically combine in very large numbers behind the ideas of some of their leaders. Now, that had a good side as well as having a downside. And I think we would find it very difficult to fit into that world today. We're so used to self-expression, we're so used to our own freedoms, that sort of collective freedom would be probably quite repulsive to us. But you can see how power arose from it at the same time. So it's paradoxical. And one more thing to say is that Keynes was already recognized as something of a prophet. In 1919, he'd written his book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, showing how the Treaty of Versailles would lead inexorably to another world war. And by 1936, people could see that was coming. So there was a sense of desperation, there was a sense of need, there was a sense that a great global crisis was on its way, and something very big was required to prevent that from materializing.
All right, so let's talk about the spread of neoliberalism. The plotting, I guess, and the sort of the drawing out of this philosophy, if you want to call it, I guess, started around that time in Mont Pelerin, and it took quite a while to catch on, I guess.
Yeah.
But what was the channels? What was the channel in which it made it there? Because it wasn't necessarily just. It wasn't a unified elite. There was a lot of, it seems to me, purchasing there was a lot of billeting, paid for billeting for a long time.
So this was another elite project, but it was a different elite. While people like John Maynard Keynes moved very smoothly through the mainstream British establishment, in this case, the initial ideas came from outside the establishment, particularly from Friedrich Hayek, who was this Austrian economist who was something of a figure of fun within British academia. He was considered a very fusty, very boring character who was way out of the mainstream, and he was sort of seen by other academics as something of a fanatic. Similarly with Ludwig von Mises, and they published their books respectively in 1944 and 1945, The Road to Serfdom and Bureaucracy, but they very quickly caught the imagination certainly of part of the public, and then very quickly too they caught the imagination of the world's richest people, who then massively subsidized the creation of what has been described as a neoliberal international, an international network of academic departments, of politicians, of journalists, and particularly of think tanks, a lot of which were then set up at the time with huge bequests from some of the world's richest people and corporations, with a quite deliberate attempt to start building on this new story to create a new political reality. And some of its early architects were very clear that this would take them 30 years. They recognized that they were living in a period of Keynesian hegemony, where everybody could basically see that there wasn't another show in town. I mean, even Richard Nixon later on was alleged to have said, "We are all Keynesians now." Because it was just the prevailing common sense, because it was the narrative that had sunk in. And even people who'd never heard of John Maynard Keynes and never heard the term social democracy and would have had no idea what it meant were social democrats, and they were Keynesians because it had just become social common sense, which everybody subscribed to. So the neoliberals knew they were going to be in there for the long haul. And they persuaded these extremely rich and sometimes rather sinister people who were supporting them to fund them for the long haul and to set up academic departments in Chicago and George Mason University and Virginia and many others, to start developing and promoting these ideas, hothousing them, finding ways in which they could be acceptable to the public. Because as neoliberalism evolved, it became more and more radical and extreme, and turned from being a sort of fairly reasoned critique of state power, as it was in the form of Hayek's first big book, his Road to Serfdom, into an absolute wild-eyed, ranting, crazy manifesto, as in the book, The Constitution of Liberty, that he published 15 years later. By then, he was completely the puppet of these very rich men, and he delivered exactly what they wanted. And it's basically the non-fiction equivalent of Ayn Rand's book Atlas Shrugged, where the multimillionaires must be allowed to take over the world. Nothing should stand in their way. Anyone who stands in their way is illegitimate. Democracy must give way to money. and money must be allowed to do exactly what it wants, regardless of how that money was made, regardless of the character of those who made it, regardless of the effects on the rest of society, because the only value that should be allowed to triumph is the value of money. And this was completely unacceptable to the majority of world opinion. It was regarded as utterly repulsive by most of those who read and understood it. But amongst a very particular right-wing elite, it was seen as being the key to the world that they wanted. And Mrs. Thatcher in around 1975, when she became leader of the Conservative Party in opposition, is said to have stormed into a meeting of her shadow cabinet and slammed down a dog-eared copy of the Constitution of Liberty on the table and said, "This is what we believe." And so they then invested very heavily in softening people up, using particularly the think tanks that they funded on both sides of the Atlantic, like the Cato Institute and the American Enterprise Institute, the Institute of Economic Affairs, the Adam Smith Institute, Hudson, Heritage, a whole series of these set up by extremely rich people. And their purpose, they're not think tanks, they're lobby groups. Their purpose was basically to soften people up, to test the arguments, to find out which ones resonated, to find the right terms, the right words, the right framings in order to persuade people to accept the multimillionaires, later the billionaires' agenda, and to believe that what was good for billionaires was good for them. And they refined and refined that message until the story they told, the neoliberal story, became dominant, displaced Keynesianism when Keynesianism ran into trouble, and then quickly became the new social common sense all around the world. And it still is.
And just they've done such an exquisite job of that. I mean, there was just one thing that popped in, today. There was a poll of broadly of voters in this country of what they want out of Trump's Supreme Court pick, and not terribly surprising that 70% of Democrats want a Supreme Court nominee who would limit the amount of money corporations and unions who can spend on political campaigns. Mm-hmm. That basically Citizens United. Unions can spend an increasingly less amount of money, obviously, in this country because of recent other court cases. But 67% of Republicans want a Supreme Court nominee who's going to do that, and that's just not going to happen. And there's like there's a disconnect there between what they may have voted for and what they're going to get. But there was never a moment, I think, where anybody thought, with a list that is literally generated by the Heritage Foundation via the Federalist Society. All right, so having done such a good job of beating out Keynesianism, particularly in light of like you said, the 70s and the inflation that existed then, and various moments of high unemployment and whatnot. But so with those two examples of a new restoration story, not just being developed, but disseminated, right? And accepted. One where we had a much more homogenous type of society, both in terms of what people looked like, or not necessarily what they looked like, but who was able to participate, right? I mean, when Keynesianism was adopted in this country anyways, a significant portion of our population really had no say in any of it. No. And by the time neoliberalism was sort of broadly adopted by culture, there had been billions of dollars spent on this project. Assuming we don't have either one of those contexts or resources, how does a new restoration story develop? I mean, we just had a very encouraging win in a primary in New York City by a a woman
Alex
who will
Ocasio.
who will be a congresswoman. But we're talking about 25,000 votes that took place, and very good circumstances, and literally in our backyard here. And so, how does this more broadly permeate society?
Well, we do have something which is potentially transformative and actually had a major role in the remarkable victory of Alex Ocasio, which I think is potentially a turning point. There's something very exciting now going on, and hopefully the Democratic Party will finally realize that just carrying on with neoliberalism light isn't going to get it anywhere. But what she represents, because as you're probably very well aware, much better than me, she was very much involved in the Sanders Project, and the people surrounding her were very much involved in that. She represents the power of big organizing, and big organizing is this key tipping point political tool, which potentially can generate tremendous change. And this is using proliferating networks of volunteers to create a kind of political community which transcends normal political campaigning tactics and turns out to be far, far more effective than them. It's still in its infancy. While there were sort of previous small stabs at it, the Sanders campaign really pioneered it on a large scale, just beginning to show some of the potential of it. Then the Corbyn campaign picked it up in the UK, and in a remarkably short but spectacular 6-week run at the election here, very nearly toppled the Conservative government from a standing start at which it was completely written off. And we're only just beginning to explore the amazing potential that this has. And basically, instead of having to raise a shed load of money and employ a shed load of staffers and send smart people in suits and clipboards around to talk to people, you recruit your workers from your base, and it's that base which then connects with all the people that you want to reach. And the idea then is that your political operatives come from the very communities you're trying to transform. They can talk direct to other people in the communities and say, look, this isn't about me talking about the pain of someone else. This is me talking about my own pain, which I share with you. My experience is your experience. And not only am I going to talk about this, I'm going to recruit you. You're going to be a volunteer in the next wave. I, as a volunteer, are going to train you. You're then going to train the next set of volunteers, and we become unstoppable. And as I say, the Sanders campaign really began to explore how this could be done. By the time the Democratic nomination closed, it had taken off to such an extent that it was clear that if it had run another 2 weeks, Sanders would have clinched it. I don't think Hillary would have stood a chance if it had just carried on a short distance further. And then I don't think Donald Trump would have stood a chance, because the momentum which Sanders was beginning to build was something quite formidable to perceive. And I believe and hope that what's happening with Alex Ocasio is just the beginning of the realization of that vision.
And we should say, folks can go back and listen to Becky Bond and Zach Exley when they came on this program. It may now be a year and a half ago or so. But okay, so all right, it's not hard for me to conceive of a Bernie Sanders or a Bernie Sanders-esque candidate winning the 2020 election with that type of organizing philosophy and tactics.
Yeah.
But then the next day happens, right? Like, even with let's just use Bernie as a surrogate. I don't know if he's going to run, but even if we were to get a candidate of that ilk and one who was even more, I think at least, perceived to speak to a even broader set of concerns in this country. What happens on day 2 or after the inauguration? I mean, we still have, this. It's one thing to sort of like out organize, but then you've got to legislate, and you still, you're not necessarily able to, this is. You've organized to win an election, but then you've got to legislate and you've got to convince, people where you don't necessarily, in states that you haven't necessarily won. And, how do we get to that point where whatever this restoration story is, this story of we need more respect for the commons, we need to understand our shared fate, we need to have a more egalitarian society, which will, benefit all of us, emotionally and as well as in other areas. How does that become conventional wisdom when all of the apparatus that would spread this restoration story is driven and built around a neoliberal system?
Well, as you said yourself, we're not in the same position that prevailed in the 1930s and the 1940s, where a few people could basically control all the media and the means of mass communication, and everyone was kind of swept along on one tide or on another tide. And this is both a strength and a weakness. We have this massive proliferation of social media, of citizen-generated media, and some people are using that extremely well. Most of us are using it very badly, but again, there are tools for massively improving the way that we use it. We don't have to broker this through an elite project anymore. We have the potential through social media, through the far better means of communication, to communicate directly from grassroots to grassroots. And some people, as I say, are highly effective at that. But of course, what your question illustrates is that it is not enough just to organize. You've got to organize around a story. And the weakness which I think Bernie had, and which would have been apparent had he been elected president, was that his story was an old one. I mean, there was a lot of virtue in it, and it was certainly much better than anything else on offer, but it was kind of 1970s Keynesianism. And the trouble is, it's very hard to go back in politics and turn that going back into a new common sense. If you're going to try to have a transformative agenda, which people fall into line with because it just seems like the social common sense of the time, then trying to resuscitate an old form of social common sense just isn't going to crack it, not least because your opposition already knows how to destroy that. They were very effective. Global finance was extremely effective at ripping down Keynesianism. It pulled down the capital controls. It pulled down the foreign exchange controls. It pulled down the balanced international trading system, all of which were essential for Keynesian social democracy to flourish. You can't do it without those. And it would do it again if we try to go down that same route. So we need a new story. Every generation really needs its new transformation, restoration story. And I think that's what the Sanders campaign was lacking, and potentially so far even the more exciting Democrats are still lacking. So I think we need to pair it. We desperately and urgently need to pair it with the creation of a new story. And I'm not saying that it has to be my story or that I'm the one who's completely cracked it, not by any means. What I'm trying to do is to just sketch out the barest essentials of what that story could or should contain, and to say, right, look, I'm just sort of laying down the ground here saying It needs to be a restoration story. History shows us that very clearly. Here is what a new restoration story could look like. If you don't like the way I'm doing it, please be my guest and do it a better way, because I don't care. I want it to work. I want us to come out on top. I want the people to beat the economic elite and to actually restore order in the form of social justice, environmental justice, the distribution of wealth, good health care, good nutrition, good education, all those things we so desperately need. And if it's not the story which I've begun to sketch out, which helps that, but someone else comes up with a better one, then I will be the first to cheer. I don't care. I'm not possessive about this. I just want it to happen. I desperately want it to happen.
And so, I mean, does Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is that a story that you see as significantly different and updated from Bernie's to be effective? I mean,
I don't see it as being massively different. I mean, she's new, she's exciting, she's a wonderful person. I'm delighted and thrilled by what's happening there. But I think what I'm not so far hearing from her is something which is radically different from what's gone before, and I do think we need that.
Well, give us a hint as to what that is, because I think, one of the problems we have on some level is it's hard to imagine what you're talking about.
Okay, let me give you an example. In order to have a genuine participatory economy and participatory politics, you need a massive transfer of wealth from those who have monopolized it to society as a whole, and ideally to the community level. So one example of how you could do this, and again, I'm not saying this is the definitive example or the only way to do it, but this is just a sort of hint of the sort of thing we should be talking about. Look at where inequality is greatest, and it's in the ownership of property, the ownership of real estate, urban real estate, where in the big cities, the prime real estate is in the hands of tremendously rich people who basically can exclude everyone else, can charge massive rents for the use of their real estate, which they've done very little to create. I mean, the speculative value of that land has been almost entirely socially created, because it's society which provides the infrastructure, society which provides the atmosphere, society which provides the local businesses, all of which have lent value to that land. And society should be able to retrieve a large part of that value. And we do so through land value tax, aimed at the most valuable property and imposed at quite a high level. Now, this has several beneficial effects in its own right. First of all, it breaks the upward spiral of patrimonial wealth accumulation, where the rich become richer and richer and richer and impoverish the rest of society. Secondly, it brings down the price of land, because the speculative value doesn't accrue to the owners anymore. And thirdly, it generates a big pot of money which we can do something with. So what do we do with the money? Well, some of it should go on paying for public services, for healthcare and the rest, but some of it, the residue, should be distributed to community groups on condition they set up community land trusts. And this would be an organization which takes possession of a wodge of capital, which has a community right to buy, so that when land in its borough comes up for sale, it can have first refusal as to whether it wants to buy that land. And when I say land, I mean not just the land, but anything that's on top of that land. So say you're in a community where there's a great shortage of housing, and a casino comes up for sale, which might be occupying a couple of acres of pretty good land in a really good position. Now, a casino, is that what a community needs? Perhaps it's the last thing a community needs. That's why the community should buy the casino. It buys a casino and it knocks down the casino. And then it's got a piece of land. They say, right, okay, guys, you members of the community, what are we going to do with this land? Well, what we need more than anything is affordable housing. Not affordable housing in quote marks, but affordable housing, genuinely affordable housing. Not ghettoized. We need to mix it with less affordable housing, so we have good mixed communities. And we, the Community Land Trust, while we've acquired this site and cleared it and prepared it, we're not going to design this development ourselves. What we're going to do is to invite the people who are going to live there to design it between them. So as a community, they design not only their own homes, but also the layout of the development, the relation of the infrastructure, of the green spaces, all the rest of it, with the help of professional advice. And in doing so, they do two things. One, far better quality of urban design than you get from the commercial house builders who generally just helicopter down their standard design on a take-it-or-leave-it basis.
Right.
And two, before they even moved in, they've formed a community because they've had to work together for a year or two in order to design their living space. And then they're paying ground rent, albeit at a lower level than would otherwise occur, back to the Community Land Trust, which is still receiving land value tax residue. So it's got more money. So what does it do? Well, maybe it buys more sites, does the same thing. Maybe it starts providing some missing public amenities, youth centres, libraries, public toilets, swimming pools, whatever it might be. And then it continues to accumulate money, and then maybe it thinks, oh, we could pay a dividend here. We could pay a local basic income to every member of the community. So you can see how this transfer of economic power from the highly concentrated private sector into the community sector, the commons, can have this transformative effect whereby you can just suddenly unlock your political imagination and think, oh, we could do this and we could do that. And, oh, look, we've now got the resources to do something quite different as well. And that potentially can be one of those sort of political technologies which just unlocks change with transformative impacts.
And I will certainly say that I have reason to believe there's going to be some animosity to large-scale real estate developers in the near future. I suspect there may be a bit of a.
So we should hope. My God, haven't they had an easy time so far? It's just why do we allow these people to dominate us?
I mean, it's shocking in this city. As much as anywhere probably in the country. Maybe there's about 4 or 5 other, I think, urban centers where the prices have just gone through the roof, and it's not that anybody has been particularly making, particularly daring or risky or innovative investments. It's just that people have decided they want to live in cities, and maybe it was just a function of outlawing lead in gasoline that made them, that was the primary factor behind this, and the implications it had. But it's fascinating stuff, and folks can learn more. Out of the Wreckage, a new politics for an age of crisis. George Monbiot, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Sam. Totally my pleasure.
Bye-bye.
You take care then.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, folks. There you have it. It would be nice if Donald Trump ended up sort of being the driver behind a large-scale blowback in wanting to basically confiscatory taxes on any type of accrued value.
Gotta tell a new story
in real estate.
Hell yeah!
It's all about stories.
Folks,
I feel like we got a lot of ways to go on that. If we're going to use him in this opportunity as a way to lead that, we need more.
We'll see what happens this summer.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? It does feel like Cohen is on his last legs, really desperately. Like, I'm really gonna do it. It's one of those things. I feel like when I'm listening to now, like these interviews. I'm speaking about Michael Cohen's interview to ABC television yesterday, or over the weekend. It was very strange circumstances and whatnot, and but there was definitely a quality of like it was basically like when I say to Saul, like, I'm gonna count to 3, man, and you better pick that stuff up. 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4. 2 7/8, 2-16, 2-16. I guess where am I now? 15/16. Dude, 30 seconds. 2 and 30 seconds. I mean, there's equality about with Cohen. At one point, he's going to have to say 3. And it does appear that, at the very least, he thinks he has stuff to deliver and really doesn't want to give it to prosecutors.
Says who?
Well, I don't.
I mean, the more I learn about history and revolution and shifts, the more, I mean, it doesn't always happen this way, but like it seems very far off now, any kind of a paradigm shift, but sometimes these things happen very quickly once they start.
It is starting to feel a bit Habsburgy around here.
It's a little Habsburgy. I mean, look at Eric. Someone explain the Habsburgs to me.
Folks, don't forget. The Seder serve, the Seder, God, I can't even remember what it was now. The Sam? What is it? Serve America movement?
Yeah, Save America.
Save America.
Sam's America movement.
Sam's America movement is really picking up steam, folks. While we're doing that interview with George Monbiot, 4 different investment bankers pledged several $100,000s to the show.
We did a poll in Kansas, and the way we worded the questions, that Kansas wants America to be more pedantic, have more classes,
exactly,
and get into more long, trivial arguments.
Right. Yes. You know what we found through our Kansas research? Totally in favor of backdrops that look like a European drugstore,
yes,
as opposed to big TV screens. It was all in the research that we did. It was all the research that we did in Kansas. So we have our operatives in Denver. They did their research in Kansas.
Welcome to the pharmacy.
Everything's behind the counter, and you don't speak French.
That's right.
It's a mess.
And it's all going to be, what is it, like 16? It's all going to be trance music in here. I think, is that 16?
Oh,
16
yeah.
beats?
There's this group called
person?
Ace of Base.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, right.
Folks, in the event that these pledges to the Sam America movement don't pan out, you can support this program by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Jointhemajorityreport.com. We say thank you by giving you extra content, but you can just support the show. I mean, it's like 98 degrees in this studio. Maybe you hear some of the fans
really,
going a little bit. It's a little warm, but every day we show up, except, of course, tomorrow. It's July 4th, so we're not, probably bad timing to say every day. But you can support this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Just pennies a day. Don't forget also justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. Get 10% off. And listen, members, we're going to try and put... we're not going to try. We're going to put the deals that we offer in our ads in the description of the members' podcasts so that you can hear it. If you... so you can see it, rather. If you're on the freebie show, obviously you hear the ads, and you can make those go away by becoming a member as well. Folks, today is Tuesday. Tomorrow is Wednesday, July 4th, which means that we will not be here. We are far too patriotic to not be here. We will be out sowing revolution. And
I'll be protecting flags.
Protecting flags.
I'll be having some meetings with some MS-13 people on
yes.
Long Island.
We're all going to
actually
huge MS-13.
This is literally going to be used in like some type of sedition trial in 2022.
We are all going to a huge MS-13 cookout.
Right.
Where we will be grilling the American flag.
Is there any way you can get Richard Wolff out of game? I like Monbiot, but he's not enough of a materialist.
Yeah, we'll go. We will also probably have the opportunity to run into folks like Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi, and maybe Chuck Schumer will be there. at the MS-13.
Nothing like an
Girls
MS-13 shindig.
Yeah,
Girl's a mean flag, that one.
I love this hot dog with the spread of the Constitution across it.
I gotta get my hoodie back.
Charred
from Pelosi.
ashes of...
It used to be Bloods and Crips, but the Schwarz's day is over. It's all MS-13 now.
However, folks, if
Schumer.
if you get lonely for a show tomorrow for some reason on July 4th, you will have tonight's episode of the Michael Brooks Show will be available because it will happen tonight.
It's happening tonight.
And-
And of course, you do not need to be lonely or otherwise to enjoy it. But yeah.
Though most people
Bree
who,
Joy, Bree
watch-
Joy. What?
Nothing. Go
Oh,
ahead.
you're trying to make a joke there? No, go ahead.
I said, though most people who do are.
So you're insulting a lot of members of your audience as well.
I don't know about that.
I do. Okay, so Bree Joy will be on. Your boards is down.
No, I didn't hit it. I was just...
What were you doing?
Don't worry. Just do your thing.
I want 2 ads tomorrow dropped into the... Are we
You
releasing
got it.
anything?
You got it
There's
tomorrow.
not anything?
2 tomorrow.
I had to go to
Continue.
my contract. It's all right. Promote the other shows. It's
Okay.
fine. It's 7 o'clock tonight.
All right.
And then this Sunday for patrons, Derek Davidson and I are working backwards from Mike Pence's comment that the countries in Latin America need to respect our borders the way we respect theirs.
Ooh.
And we're doing a history going back to the good neighbor policy of all the different ways the United States has respected Latin America's borders. Tonight, Bree Joy, Jake Flores in studio. Thanks.
Should get FDR to call in about that good neighbor policy.
Fuck you, Derek Davidson.
And of course, you can also listen to the Antifada, which is available at on iTunes as well, and at patreon.com/theantifada.
Yes. The episode we currently have up is...
If you're lonely.
Or listen with your friends. Even, leftist media. It's all about collectivity. But the most recent episode we have up is still our collaboration with Brett of Revolutionary Left Radio. Really happy about how that turned out. And tomorrow we will be dropping our new episode, which we recorded after the beach, which was not easy because our hate was very diluted by all the sand and the nutcrackers we had consumed there. But
Nutcrackers?
Oh, you don't know about nutcrackers?
Are they edible weed products?
No, it's like a frozen cocktail beverage that a nice man comes along and sells you at the beach.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never heard of this at all.
Wow, when was the last time you went to the beach?
Ages and ages ago.
Gotta hit up Fort Tilden. That's where it's at, man.
I haven't been to the beach in so long, and then it's like I'm trying to make sure that my kid doesn't get sun.
Yeah, well.
Sit there and hold an umbrella over his head.
Well, it goes down a little easier with a little grain alcohol Slurpee in your hand. I'll tell you that much.
Well, all right. I've got to make a mental note of picking up the grain alcohol. Speaking of grain alcohol, what's happening on Literary Hangover this week, Matt?
Sleepy Hollow coming out on Saturday. The members of patreon.com/literary hangover got some bonus material. Also on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, all the places you can download.
I enjoyed the Rip Van Winkle episode. It's good stuff.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Head to the fun half, wherein we will take your phone calls and your IMs via the app at majorityapp.com. Be right back.
Oh, she's so young.
We are back. It's the fun half, ladies and gentlemen, of the Majority Report. And, well, maybe we should wait for Michael gets back to the bathroom. He's just such a Tucker Carlson fan. I'd hate to play anything from Tucker Carlson, but let's go to it's going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of ICE as a campaign issue. The abolish ICE movement and has been the velocity. I mean, look, we were saying abolish ICE on this show, I don't know, a year ago, maybe, right? And we're a YouTube show, a podcast, and we're, I wouldn't say that we're outside the mainstream, but I didn't in any way conceive of the idea that would become adopted by Democratic politicians.
That it would jump from left Twitter to...
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't even that big on left Twitter a year ago, right? I mean, it's like the concept of removing an agency was not even seemingly contemplated. Now it is becoming, I wouldn't say it's a mainstream position in the Democratic Party, but it is becoming, it is not a marginal position. Within the Democratic Party, there is a significant strain of Democrats now who I believe by the fall will be adopting. I would be surprised if not like a third of the Democratic Party, in terms of people who are running for re-election, don't adopt this stance in one form or another, which is sort of stunning. And it certainly seems to be, the Republicans certainly want to run on this. But it's hard to imagine that it's going to get more traction than just the sheer racism that is the subtext of it, right? And but here we have a South Carolina representative, Ralph Norman, going on Fox News, and this is when I hear comments like this, I begin to wonder if they're not afraid that they're losing this argument, right? Here we go.
What would you say to the critics, for example, who'll say this is what America stands for? The Statue of Liberty and our history of encouraging immigration to our nation upon which this great democracy was built.
Well, that's true, but, in today's world, we've got 3,000 Americans dead from 9/11. We've got threats, we've got shootings, we've got issues that we've got to address. I'm for the American people.
Pause it. Let's just break down why he's defending ICE and an anti-immigration stance. 9/11, which had the implications of ICE were zero. And obviously, now ICE didn't exist at that time, but there was you could have the exact same ICE force you have today, and none of those people would have been stopped. In fact, I would argue that in some respects, absence any new attention that's been paid by the CIA and the FBI, that the work of ICE actually cuts against security, right? Because they are expending so much in terms of resources to arrest moms and separate children and house families that we're not expending resources. If I was worried about our national security in this way, I would be very concerned about what kind of a resource drain ICE is. And then he talks about shootings and whatnot. Crime is down across the country in virtually every single urban center in the country by 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 60%. Particularly violent crime, 70% over the past 20 years. 18 years ago when 9/11 happened. And I mean, maybe people can imagine around the country that, oh my God, we don't want what happened to Long Island, that they had to be liberated from multiple cities, happened in our neighborhood. But I mean, how much of that a motivating factor can it be if people themselves are not experiencing it? And then, of course, he said, etc. Let's continue. Is there much more to this?
We've got the juice on it.
Okay.
I mean, I also to just historically, they did use the same arguments, his analog, to block people from coming to the country. Historically, there always has been nativist and racist sentiment who said that Irish people were all, drunks, Italians were all criminals. Like, there's nothing new in the argument that he's making.
There's nothing new in the argument he's making, but he's not making the first order argument, which is like, we need to protect this country from illegal immigrants. Or that we're changing the tenor.
But remember the James O'Keefe video of dressing up in a Bin Laden mask and crossing the border? That is the level at which these things come from. It's not first or second.
I agree.
It's nonsense.
I agree. I just don't think that this is going to, you need to expand the argument to motivate the people who are not coming out in these special elections, who are not, we're not showing that.
I mean, you just look at how they have decided to play this. And if you synchronize like relentless one-dimensional propaganda, voter suppression, and these policies, it seems to me a couple weeks ago, we played a clip of Trump voters on CNN. And among many dishonest and disgusting things that they said, one woman in the most honest moment looked at the interview and she's like, and quit trying to make me feel bad for these kids. And it's like, yeah, there you go.
Right.
That's who they're turning out. And I don't know. Maybe the theory is suppress and depress the rest. I don't know.
But here's the thing, is that I'm not, none of my comments are posited on the idea that Trump voters are not going to vote for Trump voters. I perceive Trump voters as being immutable. But what is clearly a problem for the Republicans, and I think we're going to see this in the polling as we move into, sort of the more likely voter models, and whether or not they're correct is another question. But there are just simply more people, whether you want to call them Democrats or left of center, or even maybe even slightly right to center, people coming out and voting for Democrats than they are Republicans in all these special elections. Now, it's quite possible. Maybe that's indicative of nothing. Maybe that's just a total coincidence that we keep seeing these type of numbers. But I don't think so. And they have not been able to figure out, even in an issue like this, like ICE just does not seem to have the same resonance. But what it does is it keeps forcing politicians like this and voters like that to come out and say, don't make me feel bad for the fact that we are literally, functionally orphaning 12-year-olds in the name of our national security. I mean, that's the argument. Every time ICE is brought up, why would you want to abolish ICE? Well, because they are orphaning children. They are disappearing children. That's why. Because they're a rogue agency that instead of protecting us from people who would do us harm, they are supposedly protecting us from the guy or the woman who is going to pick a pear for us, or pick an apple, or make sure that we have low-cost kale, or, plums. I mean, that's basically what it's coming down to, right? Like, I mean, they're going out into the fields and setting up roadblocks in rural areas. And they're not catching sleeper cells.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that immigrants do low-wage jobs that Americans don't want to do is not a good line to defend them upon. But that said, it's going to be very damaging to the economy in the present tense.
Yes, but I'm not saying that they should get low wages. I'm just saying that, like, the argument that you're protecting the country by going out and setting up a roadblock to get the guys who are coming in from the fields is pretty thin gruel.
What Sam was saying is that they should be defended getting paid low wages to pick
Cherries, plums,
Very
pears,
specific, very specific fruits.
tomatoes, but also corn.
Especially apples.
Apples mostly.
Oh, wow. Here we go. Oldie but a goodie.
What's that? That junk? But it's all wrong, isn't it? Why does that tweet come out now? That's from a couple of days ago, isn't it? Oh, she responded? Yeah, that was all from a couple of days ago, but we can talk about that. But in the meantime, Scott Pruitt is back in the news because it is a day that ends with a Y. And there is somebody doesn't like Scott Pruitt who works with him, or who did. Two of Scott Pruitt's top aides have provided fresh details to congressional investigators in recent days about some of his most controversial spending and management decisions, including his what seems to be relentless push to find a six-figure job for his wife. Like he tried to
get her out of the freaking house.
I mean, it's not inconceivable to me that this is an exit strategy for his marriage.
Why can you get bribed by everybody on the planet, but you can't even get me one goddamn gig?
He tried to get her a Chick-fil-A affiliate.
I remember
right?
that one.
Okay,
like a franchise. Right?
a franchise, right? He
It's like Redneck Sopranos. I love it.
Does EPA letterhead make that easier to get?
Apparently not. It didn't work. And it's unclear to me where he went out seeking, but it was like with, maybe in some right-wing, getting in the right-wing dole. But apparently that's was the primary job of his assistants, was to go and find somebody who would hire his wife for more than $200,000. It's awesome. He would, and then of course, Pruitt apparently also would routinely ask his assistants, and this is coming from former assistants, to put hotel reservations on their personal credit cards rather than his own. I can tell you, those are some high quality assistants, because I once tried to get Michael to pay $10 for a pizza before I get back to front.
Forget it.
Nope.
I
Not
know
gonna
you.
do it. Not gonna do it.
Nope.
Apparently, one of his executive scheduler, Sydney Hupp, was stuck with a bill of roughly $600 for a booking she had made for the administrator's family while in transition, and that didn't sit well with her. But folks, Scott Pruitt, to say that this guy is shameless would be the understatement of the century. For some reason, and look, there's been a lot of people fired from the Trump administration, not just for reasons that weren't corruption, right? Mick Mulvaney had to get fired because he was sort of dipping into personal money. Wasn't Mulvaney?
No, Mulvaney's still there.
Just because of health.
The guy
No,
from
but he's
Health-
over at Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Yeah, but the guy from Health is. I think,
Oh, right. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. Price. Right. Tom Price. Sorry. He got fired because of scandal. Scott Pruitt seems to have, lapped that guy. I'm convinced that it has to do with Harold Hamm and his relationship to Scott Pruitt.
Pays proper tribute.
But I think there's just
What's Ham's money from?
Fracking. He owns he's a huge carbon energy guy. Huge, massive. One of the billionaires. And so it's hard to imagine any other reason why Scott Pruitt is still there. But he is. And here's something that's important. It's very important to maintain civility in society, because if that breaks down, folks, then we're no different than just animals. So when you go to point out that someone like a Scott Pruitt should not be working in the government and should resign, please be civil, like this woman who did it at a restaurant very recently and took a video. And also take a video so that we can see how civil you are. This is Kristen Mink. She posted, I think, on her Facebook page. She was having lunch with her kid in Washington, D.C. I imagine there was somebody else there because somebody else was holding that was recording it on their phone. And she must have written down what she wanted to say to Scott Pruitt. Also, very smart thing to do.
Good advice, yeah.
Very good advice. So you get in there and you're concise. You're not like stuttering John, who happens to like, oh, I can't believe I'm on the phone with the President of the United States. Let me see if I can completely waste this opportunity.
Utter fill.
No, go up there, write down your points so that you're very succinct. And here she is. She posted this video.
I just wanted to urge you to resign because of what you're doing to the environment.
Pause it for 1 second. The look on his face, like when she comes up and she goes, hi, and she's got her 2-year-old kid. Pruitt actually has like a vague smile on his face. And God knows what oil lobbyist he's sitting with or whatnot. But now, look, here's the thing. This guy he's sitting with, we don't know who he is, but take a look at the cufflinks. I would be willing to bet you anything this dude is a lobbyist. All right? And, I mean, maybe he works at the EPA. Sweet cufflinks, though, on this dude. I don't know. All right, so it was Scott Pruitt's face. Really, I love when it drops when she just says, hi. And he's like, and she goes, I want to urge you to resign. Here we go.
Hi. I just wanted to urge you to resign because of what you're doing to the environment in our country. This is my son. He loves animals. He loves clean air. He loves clean water. Meanwhile, you're slashing strong fuel standards for cars and trucks for the benefits of big corporations. You've been paying about $50 a night to stay in a DC condo that's connected to an energy lobbying firm while approving their dirty sands pipeline. We deserve to have somebody at the EPA who actually does protect our environment, somebody who believes in climate change and takes it seriously for the benefit of all of us, including our children. So I would urge you to resign before your scandals push you out.
There you go.
That was absolutely perfect. I wouldn't change a single thing. If I was to do something like that, I couldn't get over the urge to be like, Scott, no, seriously, I got a job for your wife.
Or maybe the first thing you do is like, can I get your autograph? And I'd like your autograph before you resign, which I think you should do right after you sign my autograph. That's pretty good.
No, I've got a startup opportunity for your wife. It's a guaranteed money-making system. You just literally walk up to him and start reading like ad copy from some internet scam.
Unbelievable.
Hey.
More of that, folks.
Does your wife want to work from home and be financially liberated?
Good for her.
Follow these 4 easy steps. First step, you resign.
Now, speaking of...
then tweet your social security number.
Speaking of Scott Pruitt being very politely, very civilly approached in a restaurant, I guess we could all say, like, hey, who owns that restaurant? Why would they let Scott Pruitt eat in there? Don't they care about the future of our environment, our country? Well, let's check in with the original Can't Eat Anywhere OG non-customer, Sarah Sanders, and Steve Ducey and the Fox and Friends JV team, because they got Hegseth there, right? Are on the case, and they're going to speak to this is how good journalism is done, folks.
Since you were asked to leave the Red Hen out in Western Virginia, have you gone to another restaurant anywhere? Are you a little worried that might happen again, or what?
I've been to one, but I'm not going to name locations to keep from creating any problems. It went fine. And Steve, if you're asking if I can come out to dinner with the Fox and Friends team, I'm happy to do that. If that's what you're
there you go.
Yeah, I bet you he is. And let me just put out a plea to anyone within the sound of my voice. If you happen to see Sarah Sanders or any of the Fox and Friends folks out there, just go up, be very polite, ask them to resign from whatever the job that they have.
Yeah,
and,
Fox News people, too.
Yeah, that would be great. Send us a video, and it would be much appreciated.
Ask them if they're upset of having to forego raises to pay for sexual assault claims.
That's a nice dinner starter. That's a nice. Hey, how you doing? How do you feel about your earnings depreciating because of this massive global sexual harassment ring you work for?
Did you see this? We didn't play this the other day, but it was pretty nasty. Antifa came out as the Proud Boys in Portland started marching. And apparently some of the Patriot Prayer folks.
Fascists.
Yeah. I mean, do they self-identify as theocrats? Right? I mean, I wonder if they do.
They're not racist. They're Western chauvinists. That's very
chauvinist.
different.
Yeah, very different. And not necessarily Western chauvinists, like North American Western chauvinists, right? Because you don't see them out there, marching in defense of what's happening to their fellow Western Hemisphere folks down at the border. Have the Patriot Prayer folks been down there protesting the kidnapping of children? Here are anti-fascists facing off against some of these, fascists. Whoa. Jeez. Where are the cops?
The cops were watching while this happened. They let them through.
Jesus. They are looking for this type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they came there specifically to beat up activists and anti-fascists. Like, it is part of the Proud Boys initiation that you beat up Antifa or a liberal. So, there you go. Work out, guys.
There you go.
A Nazi worked out today, did you?
There you go. That's nuts. It's really nuts. I noticed all the Patriot Prayer guys all had bicycle helmets on or something. The Antifa's got to get on that, I think, a little bit.
Yeah. Their moms put the helmets on them before they went out there.
That's right.
It's going to look like medieval night warfare in like 2 years.
Right?
Less than.
We should be developing sort of like the
Chris Lopaco.
Well, Chris Lopaco's on
Yeah,
there,
Lopaco
He's got
already
the
had
minimum
that.
viable product.
Yeah, he does have the initial product. What did it stand? He worked it out where it actually was like the cuck. It was
What?
like some type of tactical protection gear.
Does he really have that?
Prototyped it on GoFundMe and then they kicked
canceled it.
Yeah, because
Oh, wow.
they're in the pockets of big fascists.
Interesting.
Now-
GoFundMe is like, we're here to save people from the medical catastrophe of America and crowdsource the fact that we have one of the most unethical healthcare systems on the planet, not for anything potentially funny or interesting.
Tucker Carlson was, to the best of my knowledge, not in Portland, not marching with the Proud Boys or the Patriot Prayer folks. However, he's still doing his part. Here he is, where he's interviewing Amir Zar, a professor at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. He was on the program to argue that Trump's travel ban, the Muslim ban, is effectively white supremacy. Right? Now, here's the thing. This is the third iteration of the so-called travel ban. It now includes North Korea and Venezuela. We have, I think, a annual total of 0 visits from North Korea per year. from non-diplomats, I should say. Venezuela, the totals are also are not quite zero, but fairly limited. So these were window dressing for a policy that on multiple occasions Donald Trump referred to as a Muslim ban. Now, does it ban all Muslims? No. Here's the thing. You can be racist, but you don't have to you could be a member of KKK and you don't have to lynch every single black person that you see. If you lynch a couple, you're still a racist, right? I mean, that's the way that it works. You don't have to ban every single country full of Muslims because, let's say, maybe you have a hotel deal at one country that is majority Muslim and you don't want to screw that up.
If you're the Massachusetts Bay Colony, you don't take on the Pequots and the Narragansetts because you're still trading with the Narragansetts. You just take out the Pequots first.
No, but that proves they love Indians. They love Native Americans. All right, but here is Tucker Carlson trying to prove that he's not also a white supremacist.
Deny that. Wait, hold on. Wait, just answer one question before you make another stupid generalization. Specific question.
Sure, go ahead.
If this is a white supremacist country with a white supremacist leader, a white supremacist Supreme Court.
I didn't say it says a white supremacist country.
We have a white supremacist as a president, and you said it's a white supremacist Supreme Court.
Yes.
Okay. Why
no,
would
I didn't say we have a white supremacist Supreme Court.
Want to move? The decision was moved, animated by white supremacy. You said. Why would Africans want to move to a country run by a white supremacist?
Okay. Look, this country still has a lot to offer.
Do you guys take English? Okay. No. But why would they want to move here?
Wait a second. But wait a second. First off, why would an African want to move to a country that has been that elected a white supremacist for 2 years? I mean, I think there's probably actually a lot of people who are not white who are asking who question whether or not they want to live in this country. But it's now the president also, I should say, and maybe Tucker Carlson's not aware of this, but the president does not get to permeate every single interaction you have, right? Like you could, like I don't like Donald Trump, even though I'm white, his white supremacy does not impact me, but I'm still not going to leave the country, right? If I'm from Honduras or El Salvador, and my kid may be killed by gang violence, I'm still going to come up here, even though Donald Trump doesn't like brown people.
Even though he tweets about animals.
Exactly. And then I should say that when you invite a law professor onto your show, and you've been having a conversation with them in English for an extended period of time, sort of inappropriate to imply that they're not speaking English or they don't take English.
And I think he does this because he realizes the guy's going to have an answer to his question.
Right.
It's also a twofer.
That is also, I think you're absolutely right. Tucker Carlson, total misdirection. When he gets in trouble, he starts getting a little bit more inflammatory so that becomes the issue and he can get off the original topic.
He also is he does a race thing, and then he's an academic, and Tucker loves you guys just can't speak plain English.
Right.
White supremacist Supreme Court.
Yes.
Okay. Why would
I didn't say we have a white supremacist Supreme Court.
Want to move? The decision was moved, animated by white supremacy. You said. Why would Africans want to move to a country run by a white supremacist? Okay.
Look, this country still has a lot to offer.
Do you guys take English? Okay.
No.
But why would they want to move here if it's a white supremacist government? Honestly, are they insane?
So I guess what Tucker's saying is that how can you be white supremacist and be against Islam if Islam is not a race? Right? Because it's so rare to find, let's say, a white supremacist who might resent a member of a religion that's not Christianity, but maybe they're mostly white people. I'm trying to think of is there an example in American history of, let's say, the KKK? I'm trying to think of what the example is. Oh, I know. The KKK, white supremacists. They also had a problem with Jews back in the day. But let's hear Tucker try and, I guess, make this about sort of some type of misclassification. How can he be white supremacist if he has a problem with Muslims?
Government. Honestly, like, are they insane?
No, this country, despite the policies of Trump, this country is still a great country to move to. But Trump is trying to reverse that. Trump is trying to say we have too many people here. He's blaming non-whites for the problems of poor white Americans, and that's how he won, right? And we know that he played on these things. He told us he played on these things. He told us he played on these things. I mean, you're giving him more credit than he deserves. You're trying to put words into his mouth that he didn't say.
What I'm asking you is someone who is making No. I'm only talking about Trump. I'm going to give you one more chance. It's so frustrating to talk to someone as dumb as you, but let me just try to pinpoint what you're saying.
You know what was awesome about that? Because Tucker, it was almost as if he was just too exhausted during that to even like come up with something. Like he didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to say. And so he had to basically go and call the guest he's brought on dumb.
Well, I don't know if we took it, but he cut the other guy off last night. I think Tucker's not. I mean, look, let's be real here. I can be objective. He's not looking very well. He seems really tired. Seems a little puffy, a little overextended, maybe.
Tired. Maybe he's, look, it's summer. Everybody wants to get to the beach.
Go to the beach.
Is there any more?
Take a break from promoting racism.
You, as someone who is making
No. I'm only talking about Trump.
I'm going to give you one more chance. It's so frustrating to talk to someone as dumb as you, but let me just try to pinpoint what you're saying.
Well, you're purposely... Listen, Tucker, I know that you agree with Trump's white supremacist policies. I know that you want this country to...
Stop. They're actually going crazy. You want to have like a reasonable conversation?
You want to have a reasonable conversation?
White supremacy. It's too frustrating.
You're dumb.
Yeah. They can't have a dispassionate conversation about white supremacy without getting triggered.
Meanwhile, that guy was not in any way coming off to me as being like, emotional or hysterical. The guy, he was laughing when Tucker called him dumb.
That was cool.
It's times all right.
Tucker just got owned.
I don't believe in, I'm not for toxic masculinity, but there are still times when I wish our news shows were more like the ones that we've probably played clips of in Eastern Europe, where if you say something like that, somebody might slap you.
Right. Well, first of all,
I support toxic masculinity, and
they will never have people in studio that they disagree with. Never, ever. Because of that reason. Because they don't have the ability to cut them off.
You just can't have reasoned discourse. You're an idiot.
They don't have the ability to cut their mics off or cut their cut away.
Because he's live. I think O'Reilly would do that because he was a pre-recorded.
Are they also afraid of being slapped? Because I hope they are.
I would imagine deep down they are.
Imagine, just to follow Tucker's premise, imagine Trump was such a racist that literally everybody just that wanted to maybe escape to America from something decided, okay, we can't go. You'd have to be pretty...
You would have to... Well, again, of course, the other part, and as always, it doesn't matter to point out the contradiction, but it's like, actually a good demonstration, as you said before, is I'm fleeing a situation that is so catastrophic, probably fitting the definition of a refugee, where I'm willing to come to a place that's governed by a bigot. And also it isn't, yes, you're right, it isn't just who the president is. There's many other aspects to coming to a place.
Give him a little more time.
Well, that was the thing too. Like, what would he do to implement that being reversed? What he is doing. Right. That's what I would have said. Yeah. I would have said, what he is doing, idiot. Do you speak English?
Well, one of the things I would do would be to kidnap the children of these people.
I'm just spitballing here. I'm thinking kidnapping children, calling for indefinite detentions, and maybe a ban on a significant part of the countries where people come from. Those are some ideas. Or do you not speak English,
we could also,
you puffy-faced
We could
moron.
also send back...
Then I would have slapped him happily.
Hundreds of thousands of people who come from countries where they've suffered earthquakes or political revolutions or whatnot. We could just send them back. All right.
How would you do it? How would you even do it? Tucker
Can't
Carlson.
even talk to you.
I can't even talk. Okay.
Can I please have a game plan? Calling from a 651 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
The social justice warrior, a.k.a. the Chris Lapaco. I'm calling from Minneapolis. How you doing?
Hey, the Chris Lapaco. Where the heck? What happened? We send
Speak
you
of the
to.
devil.
We send you to the Peterson thing. We never hear back from you.
Well, I'm here today. I called in a couple times, but I got shut out. You know, it's like you guys are popular. And also, I was calling from a phone number that wasn't mine. So
okay.
Might not recognize.
Yeah, okay.
So,
all right.
Anyway.
Fill people in. You went to the, what's his face, Jordan Peterson's thing. Did you learn some life lessons?
Well, I promised Michael Brooks that I would not talk about this unless other people paid me. But you paid me, so I'll talk about it.
Thank you very much.
I went to his concert or whatever, his lecture, and Brooks told me about his argument about cultural Marxism going back to the John Birch Society, and it goes back even further. But anyway, what I did, long story short, I didn't want to I wanted to throw a snowball at him, but I was like, that might get me in trouble. And then I thought about water.
How the poetry of that is perfect, right?
Wait, a snowball?
Because remember his whole the boys got through snowballs and
but how are you going to do that? It's the middle of summer.
Well, I know, but there would be a beautiful symmetry to the snowball.
It would be awesome if you threw a snowball at him.
It would be like putting Sam Harris in context.
That should be the official way to protest him, actually.
Give him a taste of his own medicine.
There we go. It's just a healthy display of masculinity, folks. It's the basis of Western civilization.
That'll keep the testosterone
Anyway,
flowing.
but I didn't want to get a charge or anything, so I just didn't shower for a couple days, and then I went in there nice and stinky, real ripe, and so I figured I wouldn't sit next to a woman, right? So it wouldn't really matter.
Well, okay,
Is this going where I think it's going?
Well, I sat down, and I didn't think I would be next to a woman because there's a bunch of, incel, chubby white dudes. And no, it was like a cute lady sitting next to me, but she was obviously disgusted by my scent, like she was covering her nose and stuff like that. So I was like,
my God.
Well, at least mission accomplished. I know that they can smell me. But then I was gonna try to wait for a Q&A session or whatever at the end, but I wasn't sure if there was going to be one. And then he got to the cultural Marxism thing, and I just stood up. He was saying, it's cultural Marxism forces people to stay silent, and when people stay silent, then you get the Nazis and you get Stalin, and people need to speak up against it. And I stood up and I said, okay, I won't be silent anymore. Everything you're saying is a rehashed bullshit from the John Birch Society, and you're a Nazi. And so then everyone started booing me and calling me a commie and threatening to kick my ass and whatnot. So I got kicked out of the theater, but it happens sometimes. You get kicked out of places and they don't let you in for a year. You just come back, 366 days and say that you're back, and they don't really remember you. So,
all right, well, that sounds.
So he didn't. So the whole because basically the whole story is literally. I mean, I don't know if he literally got it from them, but the whole cultural Marxism thing, it's just John Birch Society stuff. So he's just doing John Birch Society meets Christian Deepak Chopra with the mannerisms of like a hysterical woman in a 50s movie, and that's Jordan Peterson.
I thought you were working your way up to the stink palm moment.
Oh, no, I didn't think I would get close enough to him, but I was like 30 feet away. So if I had a snowball or wet paper towel, I was also thinking water balloon because I could sneak that in. But, I could have hit him if I did it, but, I want to keep my record clean.
No, I think it's palm.
I'm glad that you did not.
I think you followed the right course there, buddy. I might have even showered.
I'm sorry?
Nothing. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I want to say, speaking of being civil and confronting Nazis, well, Antifa, when they're fighting people, they need to learn how to fight. I've just noticed in some of the brawls, a lot of them get knocked out and they don't know how to throw a punch, and they drop their hands. I just want to give one piece of advice for anyone who's getting in a fight, especially Antifa people. Keep your hands up. That's 80% of it right there. So that's first and foremost. But I really want to talk about, did you get a chance to cover this CBS interview that got interrupted by DHS agents?
Yeah, we did that. We did that last week, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was nuts.
But yeah, well, and I just want to say with that, and I'll get off so you can get some other callers, but to the weak centrist Democrats and the Republicans, when new leadership, when the like socialist Democrat type people are saying that we want to abolish ICE, and everyone's acting like it's some big crazy thing that no one's ever heard of to abolish a federal agency before. The GOP wants to abolish the IRS, the EPA, the Department of Education, all of these. And so, like, if you want to act like the federal government can't get along with one less law enforcement agency or federal agency,
we handled
you're being
this
disingenuous.
perfectly fine prior to 2003, I guess it was, when ICE was started. You can have the INS. They can just, but the problem with this agency is that they are rogue, that they have become so corrupted and mismanaged, and their mission has become so sort of problematic that you even have people who are lumped in with the agency don't want to be around them because they're wasting our tax dollars on things that are not protecting us. We don't have a dedicated federal agency to deal with any other misdemeanors in this country. And it's absurd. It really is absurd. I appreciate the call.
Well, yeah, if you're a Democrat, you can't say that. Like, even if you were for it at the time, it's crossed the line now. So even if you can have a change of heart and say, yeah, let's abolish this thing,
right.
go back
Well,
to the way it was. I was wrong in the past.
But there was no, and I appreciate the call, Chris. There was no like a narrowly tailored vote on ICE. It was a part of a much bigger vote on the Department of Homeland Security.
I would just like to note apropos of that, because a lot of us have been very frustrated by Bernie Sanders not being ahead on this issue, and I do think it's, he did just put out in 2002. I voted against the creation of DHS and the establishment of ICE, and that was the right vote. And he's gone on to adopt the right position. But it is important to note that
the reason why people voted against that, though, at the time,
I'm sure it
had to do with unions.
Yeah, it had to do with union, and also I think he expressed some civil liberties concerns at the time in general. Because did Bernie? I think Bernie voted against the Patriot Act, which I know is a separate bill.
Separate bill, much separate. Calling from a 512 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Tammy in Texas.
Tammy in Texas. What's on your mind, Tammy?
I just wanted to touch in and tell you guys about the DSA drag prom here in Austin Saturday night.
The DSA drag prom.
Tell me more.
Yeah, it's obviously it's Pride Month, and DSA Austin is, I guess, like every other DSA chapter, enjoying a real growth spurt because of the New York election. And I'm a member of DSA. It was my first DSA event.
Hell yeah.
I'm a nerd, which means it was 8 till 2 a.m., so I showed up at 8 and stayed till 10. But they did not play La Poupée. But what I wanted to say is I've been at a lot of Democratic Party events here in Austin over the last, since December. And the nice thing about the DSA event was I was one of the old, Sam, I'm your age, I was one of the oldest people in the room.
Oh.
And it was a much more diverse crowd than most of the Travis County Democratic Party events, which tend to be, well, I can't tell white from Hispanic, but they tend to be very white. Not a lot of black people at Democratic Party events. There was a great mix of ages and races, and it was a gender-bending event. So the Energizer honey that I was dancing with, she was wearing a dress. I don't know what the right pronoun is, but it was a lot of fun, and it seems to me like the joyful warrior thing. Jamie, I know that you're like hardcore, get out in the street, slap and rumble and strike, and I'm with you, girl. But I think the joyful warrior thing is important too, especially right now when everybody's so bummed out. And it was just a really good time.
Oh, I agree 100%. If I can't dance,
DJ
I don't want to be in your revolution.
DJ, I think his name is Louis Fats. He was rocking like serious roots disco. I'm talking like the Commodore's Brick House and stuff like that.
Now we're talking.
I understand. I don't know who Ace is.
Stuff that old people like me actually cut our teeth on.
Yeah.
Where's Earth, Wind, and
really
Fire?
good time.
God damn it.
All right, well, Tammy,
So
it
what I
sounds
wanna
like it
say
was a
is
lot of fun.
Anybody thinking that DSA is a bunch of like going to church with a bunch of like hardcore maniacs who don't want to do anything but talk politics, they know how to fun. They know how to have fun.
All right. Thanks
It's
for the
good.
call, Tammy.
Yeah, thank you for joining. I'm so happy about that. And I put together events in New York. I always try to make them fun. So it's good to know that there's fun events all over the country.
Calling from a 615 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Matthew. I'm from
From where?
From Nashville.
Hi, Matthew. What's on your mind?
Well, I don't really know. I was calling in the other day to talk about desperation in these kind of dark times, and literally while I was on the line is when Anthony Kennedy announced that he was stepping down.
Right. Things got a little bit even more desperate.
Yeah, precisely. So I don't know. Just kind of like, I kind of live in this red wasteland, if you will, and I don't know. Like, it's just kind of maddening to me that I don't have any like outlets to. I don't know, like commiserate like I do whenever I listen to this show, and so. I don't know, if you guys have any tips, tricks, or ideas to persevere in this really shitty time, I would love to hear them, and I'll take my answer off the phone.
Okay.
Thanks,
well,
Brendan. That was really constructive.
All right. Well, let's see. Do we have any
that
tips?
was your guess what Sam was going to say.
It's what was it? What was it? Alcohol? Yeah, alcohol.
Get drunk.
I was going to say alcohol helps to a certain extent, but there's
depending on your makeup.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's and it's going to stop helping sooner or later. It's got to be that much more difficult in the context of a particularly red state. But this is what I would do. I would, go into, one of the discords from these shows that Michael or Jamie or Matt has, and go on to our YouTube channel maybe. Check out our blog. We're going to be setting up some type of forum and see if there's people in your hood who maybe, because I would imagine he didn't say where in Tennessee, did he?
Nashville.
Yeah,
Nashville.
Oh,
I think there's definitely
We've got
there's
more
lefty-
listeners in Nashville, too, in
there
particular.
is a DSA in Nashville that he could join if he wants to get involved
go
with
out
that.
and go drinking.
Go drinking with your,
you don't have to drink,
listen
but-
to Earth, Wind, and Fire with your new DSA buddies. But
That's what I would
say.
tell
I would also say I think it's very valuable to at least spend I mean, I'm not saying like, I don't know. I think you should take a news fast sometimes. I think you should engage with other things in your life and other people that you find enjoyable and that remind you that not everybody is garbage.
We got to find an organization like that to find like-minded people.
Yeah, but definitely find it. Yeah, like a DSA and email majorityreporters@gmail.com about the Discord community if you're not already a patron.
But yeah, like if you're in small areas, like I mean, I'm from North Dakota. You find the college town or whatever. You can find like-minded people there.
It's hard to be sad when you're at a party with drag queens.
Calling from a 917 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Hello?
Hi, is this me?
It is you.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, hey, Sam. This is Jake, the teacher.
Hey, Jake the teacher. Long time no hear. What's going on?
Yeah, I know. I have to wait till summertime before I get time to call you guys. I was wondering if you're up to speed on all the little things that Betsy DeVos has her fingers in lately, because it seems like she's closing in on public education for the real stranglehold lately, especially here in New York State where it's pretty interesting. So since the Janus decision, have you heard of the letters that have been, or the emails that have been going out to teachers?
Yeah,
they're getting
encouraged to quit unions essentially.
Yeah, and it's basically like click here and you can sign up and you can stop paying union dues. And so this is all being funded by the Mackinac Center, which has been funded by the DeVos family for a long time. It's also come out that 81 kids who were separated from their parents at the border were sent to Bethany Christian Services.
Yeah, we spoke about that. We spoke about this.
This is Dickensian.
Yeah. No, yeah, there is.
Dickensian.
This is a Christian adoption agency that has been highly funded by DeVos family members to the tune of like 300,000. Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yes. It's literally like baby selling.
Yeah, and it's like Cruella de Vil. So that has come out. I mean, she is, she probably isn't involved with them now, but she has her family is very involved, and some of her extended family, the board members, the contributions have been
we
traced
talked
back.
about that a little bit, Jake. But the other things that she's doing, I mean, specifically in terms of education, so much of the for-profit university stuff has been reversed, and in terms of like deregulating loans and whatnot. I mean, and that is all you need to do is go look at any of the for-profit university stocks and watch what happened to them over the past, literally the day after Donald Trump won. They knew that was going to happen. But in terms of public school education, what else specifically, aside from the sending out these emails in terms of in a post-Janice world, what else is she done that you can tell us about?
Well, here in New York, there's two things. One is that she came to visit some Orthodox yeshivas recently, and it was a really big deal that she snubbed any private schools. And what's happening here in New York State is that the yeshivas, there's a certain number. It's about a couple of dozen, maybe about 40 or 50. Hasidic yeshivas that are really ultra orthodox, and they have not been teaching the kids English for a very long time, generations, and they also have been skipping science and history and social studies and geography.
And they're getting funding. They're getting public school funding. I saw there was a piece on this recently where and I think there's maybe even, I don't know if it was a lawsuit, but they're putting students through these essentially what would be like Jewish madrasas, and they're teaching them only Yiddish and Hebrew. They are teaching them only the Talmud, and some of these kids end up to grow up, and they say like, "Hey, I want to," and understand in New York State, the ultra-Orthodox Hasidic community, it has the highest rate of using social services of any in the state. And the reason is because they are trapped in terms of whether or not they could even get a job outside of the community, because they don't have even the most rudimentary of education skills.
I have a friend of mine's older sister runs a group that specifically helps people exit that community if they're like gay, as an example.
Oh, wow.
And you're talking like a 30-year-old who doesn't know how to use a subway pass and can't speak English. That's not mythology. That's like casework.
Yep.
And grew up in New York. It's nuts. I used to live in a Hasidic neighborhood of South Williamsburg, and it was wow. It was like being among the Amish or something.
Yeah, I mean, and look, to each their own. But the fact of the matter is, if you're going to get public monies for schools, and you're going to have an accredited school by the state, you need to teach science, math, English. You need to prepare these students for going forward, which is not to say that if they want to speak Yiddish, they can speak Yiddish. If they want to speak Hebrew, speak Hebrew. If they want to spend, a couple hours a day reading the Talmud and, the Midrash or whatever, go with God, as they may or may not say. But if you're going to be an accredited school, you need to deliver a fundamental core curriculum. In many respects, there's a lot of really corrupt state politics at play with this, particularly in this, in New York politics. Some politicians are completely in the pocket of those communities. They come from that communities, but it's they should not have the ability to do that. Jake, I appreciate the call.
Betsy, you look well, very different, but you also seem inbred as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of puts the lie to these people saying their issue with immigrants is they don't assimilate.
Yeah, exactly. You don't hear a lot of those people
speak
complain.
English.
Right. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Vispa from Spokane.
Who is it?
Vispa from Spokane.
Vispa, what's going on?
Hey, well, I'm a little bummed you guys aren't doing a show for my birthday tomorrow, but that's all right.
We're actually taking it off in honor of your birthday tomorrow.
Well, thank you. I choose to believe the fireworks are for me. So.
Happy birthday, you little cock.
So, speaking of that Proud Boys video earlier, are you aware that there's CRTV ads that play before your show?
CRTV?
Are you familiar with that network?
Is that the
Crowder, Malkin, Levin.
Oh yeah.
It's got Gavin McInnes, Get Off My Lawn.
It is. I am proud to take their money. Anybody who wants to go watch that stuff, by all means, enjoy your stupidity.
Well, good. I just want to make sure you're aware.
I mean, I'm not. I don't follow what they put on YouTube, but whatever. I don't care.
We have no control of
that.
Right. Like, it's all algorithms.
Yeah.
Every time people get worried about this, it's like, first of all, great, give us the money, and secondly, there is no like ad buys or anything like that with this stuff. Not at all.
In fact, the odd part is that like the more that we like crap on someone like Gavin McInnes, the more I think we get their advertisers because it's just all
SEO.
algorithm based. Yeah, like that's why we get so many. We have so many NRA ads on our channel. I think just because we slam the NRA with such regularity.
Because you attack freedom every day.
We're going to end up getting a ton of freedom ads now, too.
No, there'll be freedom ads.
Freedom white blood cells.
You would really hate that, wouldn't you, Samantha?
Yep. All right. Well,
Did you guys also see Jordan Peterson yesterday on Rogan?
No.
Did these guys do anything?
They do
else?
every show together.
That's all they do. They just do several week rotation.
He needs to go on a walkabout or
We'll
something.
be back. Just like thinking about like, I feel like you can't like say what you think anymore. Well, it's really true because of the communist, Marxist, postmodernist. Yeah. But like you're out there just saying.
I think every time. Sorry, I think every time Jordan Peterson's been on, they've gone over the him being misquoted or misunderstood and how they can't fathom why that is. Every single time they have that conversation, it's the same thing.
Fucking mystery, dude.
Total. I appreciate the call.
So you're suing this college for some stuff they said about you. That will help the advancement of free speech, right?
It is amazing. Like the Weinsteins and Shapiro and Peterson were all on Rubin the other day, or one of the Weinsteins. Like they just do each other's shows now.
Yeah. Well,
it really is amazing. It is like literally if we the only guest that we all had on our shows was each other.
They're milking their
What was the idea?
They're collectivists. That's the problem.
Yeah. What was the title you had earlier?
Oh, the jerk encirclement.
Nice.
Calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from? 215? 215? 215? Good day. We got another, let's see, 512. 512 area code.
Hey, Sam. This is Palmer from Texas.
Palmer, what's on your mind?
I just wanted to give a clarification / update to the story I told you guys about yesterday, the one about the private detention facility here in Taylor.
Uh-huh.
All right, because you had asked about the what was going to happen with this place, as like if ICE could come in and take over. The thing is, they will have that chance. However, now that they're no longer able to use the county as a middleman, so they're going to have to go through a rebidding process. And according to the article that I'm citing right now, it's from the Texas Observer, entitled "Williamson County Votes to End Contract with Detention Facility Holding Separated Mothers." That rebidding process will take quite a bit of time, so at the very least, it will be able to hinder their operations.
Great. And now there's a ruling that by the D.C. Circuit or a district judge that they can't detain asylum seekers in the way that they've been trying to do, or the way that they've been doing it in the past. Now, as a class, they basically decide asylum seekers are going to be detained or basically put through the criminal process. The judge said, no, you've got to actually address each individual case. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But appreciate the update.
Oh, can I add one quick thing?
Yeah.
It's slightly on the same topic of one of the previous callers, the guy from Nashville. He was talking about, I guess, how to deal with living in a right-wing area.
Yeah.
This one, I don't know if it would apply to him, but as a veteran, I found quite a bit of success, and I guess defending socialism or promoting it to various people by using that as a gateway to start conversations.
All right. Well, you guys have a DSA chapter down there?
The closest one would be in Austin.
All right. All right. Well, appreciate the advice.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thanks.
Folks, it is very hard to find good people to hire. And this is something you really have to be on top of. I can't tell you how many times we have hired people here on this program, and they have turned out to just be the most racist people you could ever imagine. And they're taking over our
Jamie like that,
they're taking our Twitter feed and just putting all sorts of racist stuff in. And this keeps happening over and over and over again. It is
going back to like the very beginning of your career when you were first on radio.
Well, no, the beginning of this show. Since 2011, we've had multiple instances of people, like we used to have an email blast that we would send. And accidentally, I kept hiring people who would send out racist things in the email over and over again. And then I said, I'm going to shut down my email list because I can't help but hire racist people for some mistaken reason.
Bizarre.
It's crazy. And then, of course, we have that happens on our Twitter feed. And it's just, there's no way to prevent this, folks. I just keep accidentally hiring people who promote racist ideology. Now, I, of course, have just finished my one-man play that I've performed for you. It is a snippet of my one-man show entitled "I'm Ron Paul."
God damn it! Yet another racist. What the hell?
Because it's happened again. Ron Paul, back in the day when he had Ron Paul's Political Report, Ron Paul's Freedom Report, Ron Paul's Survival Report, Ron Paul Investment Letter. We're just rife with racist things. Like he called Martin Luther King a world-class philanderer who beat up his paramours, who seduced underage girls and boys.
Worst hire ever made.
Can you screen for this on ZipRecruiter?
On ZipRecruiter, I suppose you could, but this is, I didn't know that you could
ZipRecruiter
do
wasn't around then, goddammit.
After the Los Angeles riots, one article in his newsletter claimed that order was only restored in L.A. when it came time for the blacks to pick up their welfare checks.
That's not really racist.
We're told that
That's
it's evil to be
different.
afraid of black men. It's hardly irrational. This is from his newsletter. Given the inefficiency of what D.C. laughingly calls the criminal justice system, I think we can safely assume that 95% of the black males in that city are semi-criminal or entirely criminal. I mean, there's more and more and more stuff.
With the super racist employees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, of course, he blamed that all on his employees. He never checked his email list. So you would imagine that after having that experience, the embarrassment of having multiple emails that have gone out with your signature with racist tropes, you would say, gosh darn it, I'm going to try and not hire racists anymore. But just as a backup plan, in case I accidentally hire more racists, I'm going to just make sure that anything goes out on my Twitter feed is not racist. So, in other words, are you stunned what has become of American culture? Said Ron Paul's Twitter feed. Well, it's not an accident. You've probably heard of cultural Marxism, but do you know what it means? And then he has some photos. And look at that. There's a picture of the old hook-nosed Jew. Oh
my God.
Yeah. That is like
nothing racist about that.
The buck-tooth Asian.
The buck-tooth Asian next to the dirty Mexican, and then the Amos and Andy black guy depiction.
And they all have a giant Soviet flag arm, which they're grabbing they're punching Uncle Sam right in the chin with.
Yeah, there they go. And I'm not sure. I don't know how.
Now make sure, Leroy, that the velocity's right on the
exactly. Yes,
Cute.
of course.
It's nice. They're all working
We've
together.
done so well here in Soviet Russia.
Everybody on the count of one.
Yeah, class politics and identity politics together at last.
And then Ron Paul's like, goddamn racist employees.
I can't stop. Don't know how to do this.
How does this happen?
How does one hire non-racists?
Now, look, guys, I'm going to go to the chink place for some noodles. And when I come back, I better have a goddamn straight story on this. Yeah, what happened? Why is it free? It's because of regulation put in under Obama, which means I can't fire people, which means that I still have racists. It's the government.
Now, let me just read Ron Paul's statement. And I don't know if he actually tweeted this out on Twitter. Oh, did he? Oh, yes, he did. Apparently, he wrangled his... He retweeted it on... it was an He
deleted it and then retweeted the exact same thing. Are you stunned by what has become
but with a different picture.
With the political correctness crossed out.
Censored.
Well, thank you. Let me first say to Ron Paul, very sneaky, wants to disappear that tweet and replace it with one that people think it. Secondly, thank you for proving my point that anti-political correctness is simply the vapor version of the liquid racism, the liquid version of racism.
You probably got an angry voicemail from Jordan Peterson being like, I use that phrase, cultural Marxism, and you're ruining it for the rest of us.
Whatever subpart of Ron Paul's personality that had its tweet deleted had their free speech suppressed.
Yeah, that's true. And then he wrote on Twitter, earlier today, a staff member inadvertently posted an offensive cartoon on my social media.
Bro, sorry, man.
Dude.
No.
Yeah, you ever hear a time?
I do not make my own social media posts, and when I discovered the mistake, it was immediately deleted, and he's going to sign it Ron Paul this time to make sure it's just one of his staff members. Now, look.
Have you ever heard of time dilation?
I totally believe that it was one of his staff members. I also totally believe that he is either highly attractive to racist employees or actively looking for people who share his ideology. I mean, occasionally you hire somebody here and I find out a couple months into it, oh shit, you're a right-wing conservative? Darn it. I should have tried to suss that out beforehand. Yeah, no, it's a real problem, folks. I got to tell you. It must be.
Hey, I'm not racist, all right? Now, I'm going to want you to give me a big wink when I say that.
Yeah, it's almost like there's something about libertarianism that naturally feeds into being a Nazi.
Hard to believe. But the interesting thing about the cultural Marxism thing is like I think like they see success for like Jordan Peterson, and then they all trying to like move into that space a little bit. It's
Find your own words.
Someone sent me the original non-racist version of this cartoon a second ago. I don't know. I just emailed it to Matt.
Oh, there's a non-racist version of it?
It's actually kind of nice.
Oh, where they don't have the hook-nosed Jew, the buck-tooth Asian, the dirty Mexican, and the
anti-black guy.
Yeah.
I remember that. Back in the day before government got involved, you could have Amos and Andy. That was a really funny program.
And notice how he says offensive cartoon, not racist.
What does that mean? What does IJAM mean?
I don't know. Is this like some kind of socialist organization? It's like different people working together to punch Uncle Sam with communism. Sounds good to me.
There you go.
It's an intersectional way of saying "pow" that honors gender pronouns. I don't know.
Perhaps.
Thames Darwin. Tucker Carlson's head would probably explode if you told him Africans actually emigrated to apartheid South Africa, because even though it was obviously white supremacist, you could make more money and live more safely as a quasi-slave labor in South Africa than in a country fighting a civil war.
That's my
Everything's
point.
relative.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. So we should have an apartheid state because they'd have a better job prospects. What part don't you get?
I love Sarah Palin. On Tucker Carlson, he's probably tired. He isn't used to keeping a job this long. On the Antifa fight, go get 'em, boys. Gang, 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 squad. On the immigrant kid torture program, I'm happy to see Republicans getting back on the attack and using the old human shield defense. We had to torture these kids to save them from smugglers and nefarious people. Yeah, like their parents. That's the other thing they like to do. Blame their mom. Zero-sum Sam game. On a lighter note, all the news out there of the teams left in the World Cup, who are you all rooting for? I don't even know who's left.
France.
We got a France.
I
We
have
got a
no
Japan.
idea. Is Brazil still on? Yeah, Brazil. Brazil.
Speaking of Brazil, the original artist on that cartoon was Brazilian anti-capitalist artist Carlos Latouf.
Huh.
God damn it.
Vote for Sam. The Sam party is going to totally derail Chuck Schumer's plan of picking up some affluent suburban never-Trumper voters. For 2020 Dems need to keep it simple. The only way to win is with a Bloomberg, Booker, or McMullen Mansion ticket.
No bumps in the road.
Gregory from Oklahoma. Hey, guys, I just want to apologize as an Oklahoman for Scott Pruitt and Harold Hamm. Harold Hamm literally owns the Oklahoma GOP. In Oklahoma, he won't let us raise taxes on oil and gas, even income taxes. It's awful. Thanks, Gregory. Good to hear from you. Train boy, Scott Pruitt's $45,000 phone booth doesn't even meet the requirements for a secure phone booth. I don't want to spread unverified rumors about what it's for, but I've been hearing it could be tied to copious amounts of his preferred Ritz-Carlton hand lotion. Nick from Manitoba. Psst, Jamie, Matt, Michael, Brendan. Sam is powerless without his glasses, and if you hold up his Quip toothbrush in a loose grip over an open toilet, that type of leverage will definitely get you enough to force Sam to unionize the majority report. Lastly, Sam, in these tough times when I'm feeling blue, and I think this applies to anyone feeling down in the dumps right now, we cannot forget that Huell Hauser's spirit-soaring public access show, California Gold. I urge you all to check it out on YouTube. Stay sweet, MR Beauties. Gabe from Chicago. I was listening to History of American Electoral Politics this morning and came to the conclusion that allowed me to recontextualize neoliberalism as the failed but well-intentioned attempt by the baby boomer generation to make good on the promises of the hippie movement. If that's true, then you can see that the problems with neoliberalism directly mirror the problems of the movement it's sprung from. It's overwhelmingly white and exclusionary. It has no economic message. It's more concerned with peace, civility, and the appearance of justice than enabling the praxis that would allow the people. Any thoughts? I don't get the first part. I disagree with your second part. It's not concerned with peace and civility and the appearance of justice. Well, yeah, I guess that is true. There's something to that. The neoliberal project was perceived as one that was going to maintain stability by having a narrow group of people basically win the benefit of society.
Super stable.
I think they've got it a little bit backwards. Like a lot of the things that came out of the hippie movement were used by neoliberalism, specifically the emphasis on like individuality and this like apolitical new agey spirituality. But it was neoliberalism that came first, and it was greatly enabled by the financial crisis of the 70s.
And it wasn't just the hippies that were into individualism.
Well, the hippies predated the 70s.
Yeah, the hippies were in the 60s.
But I think...
I'm saying when neoliberalism reared its head, it incorporated some of these ideas.
I think it's not inconceivable that the individualism that came out of the 60s, right? Because you had a lot of people, a lot of middle-class people who felt like they were simply cogs in a machine, and they had the economic security to feel confident enough to express that individuality. Plus, you have simultaneously, in addition, obviously, to the war, which was a big part of it, right? Like, I'm not going to get in line to just walk into this meat grinder, essentially. You also had all of these emancipatory movements that were happening at that time. And first, the civil rights, obviously, was the one that really was, I think, drove the radicalism because it predated all of this. And in some respects, I think for hippie culture, it was their version of emancipation. And it was a cultural emancipation. And I think that may have inadvertently also set the cultural tone for neoliberal policies to ascend. I mean, you had, I remember when I was in college, Abbie Hoffman, after he came out of hiding, and Jerry Rubin, two of the yippies, who were just like more political hippies, went on tour, and Jerry Rubin was like promoting yuppieism.
Yeah.
It was hippie versus it was yippie versus yuppie, right? That was the name of the debate.
It petered out. I mean, a lot of this stuff you're talking about, like civil rights, women's rights, started very radically and did a lot of important things, but was eventually subsumed by neoliberalism and formed the left wing of neoliberalism, which we see to this day. It was appropriated and used in a gross, disingenuous, cynical way.
Yeah, I think there's some, I don't know.
Also, Adam Curtis has some good stuff on this topic, if anyone's interested. I think Century of Self is a good one.
Century of the Self, yeah.
So when Kanye
Century
was
of the
tweeting
Self.
Brother from Brooklyn, have you seen Peter Dow's tweet lately? He's seen the light. POC progressive candidates are hard to slander. No bull. Where's the Mike Serponovich impediment documentary at? What's happening? Juan from Salnus. What's the room's take on Obrador? Are you going to do
it's going
Thursday?
to tonight. I'm covering it actually as part of the first half of the show tonight, and then on Thursday, Christy Thornton's calling from Mexico. But
nice.
It's good. I mean, nothing is perfect, but in the context we're in, that was definitely the best case result.
We're going to have an interview, too, with our friend in Mexico who's very smart and very hooked in.
Dissident peasant, Sam, we aren't going to convince conservatives about ICE by telling them about produce shortages when they don't eat unprocessed food. These are the McDonald's coffees is the best coffee crowd. I don't think there's any convincing about conservatives about ICE. That's not what my argument was. My argument is that ICE is not in any way affiliated with maintaining our national security, and the weakness of their argument about the first order functioning of ICE is indicative of the fact, or is indicated by that they're not going on there and saying what ICE's actual mission is. So instead of, if they knew they had a winning argument about ICE, they wouldn't bring up 9/11. They would say, we are getting migrant workers in the fields and rounding them up. They would be bragging about what ICE actually does.
I would think of
rather
9/11 as not just a point in an argument, but actually a great national tragedy.
Billy
Excuse
Buckner.
you.
Don't
you
listen to the
forgotten?
Daily with Susan Collins. Just make you mad. Susan tells us that we should all expect John Roberts to save Roe.
Yesterday, I outlined on television pretty much exactly what the court nominee will tell me in her office
5149 issue. Bye-bye. Indeed.
to get my vote.
There are a number of NGOs that are working on social issues and community development around the world, empowering those with least heard voices. They give them confidence and skills to meet the needs of their community. Two of these I know are New Humanity and Baha'i Faith. The results are productive. They spread the efforts. Refer people to the John Nichols book, The S Word, Re-Socialism. All right, the final I'm sorry, folks. We're out of time for calls. I apologize. We'll take 4 more IMs. Censor Sweep. Matthew from Nashville should give a listen to Trillbilly Workers Party podcast. They're from Kentucky, and they're rad. Dostoevsky and the Sheets. Y'all should tell that caller to go off Kings. Some of those guys live near Nashville, and they're hella funny. Rob does solo streams on Twitch that are political, and they have a roast this Saturday. Go off Kings. Hathaway in the Berkshires. You're doing the instant message thing today. Hey, according to the independent newspapers, MS-13 has something in common with the KKK and Jeff Sessions. They hate the gay guys. Wicked retarded, right? And the final IM of the day. Folks, have a happy 4th of July. We'll be back live on Thursday. Rob and Reno, Matt, I recommend Massacre on the Merrimack by Jay Atkinson, a BU professor. It's not just the Hannah Dustin story, but a deep dive into late 17th century colonial Massachusetts. Also, an amazing description of fate of the Abenaki tribes. I actually recommend it to all.
Cheers.
All right, folks. See you Thursday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted